Chapter 1. The Myth of the Strong Culture. Every company claims to have a strong culture. It has become a badge of honor, a phrase repeated in board meetings, annual reports, and recruitment campaigns. Leaders describe their teams as family walls are covered with motivational quotes. Values are printed on mugs, screensavers, and onboarding packs. The idea of a strong culture sounds admirable, but in many cases it hides a fundamental problem: strength without direction. A culture can be strong and still be wrong. Some of the most dysfunctional organizations in history have had powerful cultures. They were united by belief, loyalty, and shared behavior. But those behaviors worked against the company's long-term success. A strong culture without clarity becomes a fortress of comfort, resistant to change and blind to external reality. What begins as unity soon becomes groupthink. Leaders often confuse energy for alignment. They see enthusiasm, engagement, and participation as proof that the culture is healthy. Yet culture is not measured by how loud people applaud the latest initiative. It is measured by how consistently people make the right decisions when no one is watching. True cultural strength is not about morale, friendliness, or social harmony. It is about alignment with purpose, clarity of priorities, and consistency in behavior. The modern corporate world has turned culture into a marketing tool. Companies build entire departments around it. They conduct staff surveys, launch culture committees, and promote well-being programs. These initiatives often come from good intentions, but they can miss the point entirely. Culture is not an accessory. It is the outcome of what the business rewards, tolerates, and ignores. When leadership teams treat culture as something separate from daily operations, they create a disconnect between what is said and what is done. One of the clearest examples of this disconnect appears in recruitment. A hiring manager might reject a technically excellent candidate because they are not the right culture fit. The phrase sounds thoughtful but often masks personal bias. It can mean the person does not think or act like everyone else. The problem is that organizations need people who challenge assumptions. Hiring only those who conform creates stability at the cost of progress. A so-called strong culture becomes a comfort zone. Another sign of cultural weakness disguised as strength is excessive pride. When teams are told repeatedly that they are like a family, they may stop questioning internal behavior. Poor performance is excused in the name of loyalty. Difficult conversations are avoided because we don't want to upset people. The desire to maintain harmony becomes stronger than the desire to improve. Real families, after all, are not always harmonious. They argue, confront, and hold one another accountable. In a business, this honesty is essential for survival. A culture that avoids conflict cannot adapt. Every meaningful improvement comes from confronting uncomfortable truths. When problems are hidden behind smiles and slogans, small issues grow into systemic failures. The longer they are ignored, the harder they are to fix. Many companies collapse not because they lacked strategy, but because they lacked the courage to challenge their own culture. The idea of a strong culture appeals to human nature. People want to belong. Shared language, rituals, and habits give a sense of identity. In moderation, this builds stability and trust. But when identity becomes more important than purpose, the culture turns inward. The company starts talking to itself instead of listening to customers, suppliers, and markets. The echo chamber grows louder until it blocks external reality. True culture strength lies in adaptability. It is not defined by sameness, but by shared principles that allow flexibility. For example, a company that values learning will hire curious people and tolerate mistakes if they lead to growth. A company that values excellence will support experimentation, but hold high standards for results. The specifics of behavior may vary, but the underlying principles remain clear. Clarity, not rigidity, makes a culture resilient. Leadership behavior sets the tone. People watch what leaders do far more than what they say. If a leader claims to value transparency but hides information, the culture will follow the behavior, not the words. If they reward visible effort instead of meaningful results, people will focus on appearances. Every system produces exactly the behavior it is designed to produce, whether intentionally or not. Culture is simply the human reflection of the systems in place. Metrics can reveal much about the truth behind the myth. Look at how performance reviews are conducted, how promotions are awarded, and how mistakes are handled. If employees feel safer pretending than being honest, the culture is not strong. It is fragile. A healthy culture encourages truth because truth leads to better decisions. Strength is measured by the ability to face facts, not by how passionately people repeat slogans. Another common myth is that culture can be fixed with perks. Free coffee, yoga sessions, or flexible working hours are all pleasant, but they do not change behavior. They are surface-level adjustments. People do not stay or perform because of office furniture or snack options. They stay because they trust their leaders, understand their purpose, and see a fair link between effort and reward. Real cultural improvement comes from structural alignment, not decoration. In practice, this means linking culture to process. If the process for decision-making is slow and political, no amount of open culture messaging will fix it. If accountability is unclear, collaboration workshops will achieve little. Culture is the shadow of structure. Change the system, and behavior follows. Ignore the system, and behavior returns to old patterns as soon as attention fades. It is tempting to believe that culture is about personality. Leaders with charisma can create short bursts of enthusiasm, but charisma does not scale. Systems do. A strong culture is one that continues to function when its leaders are not in the room. That requires simplicity, clarity, and consistency in how decisions are made and how success is defined. When people understand what good looks like and have the autonomy to deliver it, culture becomes self-sustaining. There is also a danger in over-celebrating culture. When culture becomes the focus rather than the foundation, it starts to absorb too much attention. Teams spend more time talking about how they work than actually working. Endless culture workshops create fatigue. Employees begin to see them as distractions rather than improvements. The more a company tries to fix culture through communication alone, the more it signals that leadership does not understand the real problem. Sustainable culture is built through alignment. Every process, meeting, and policy should reinforce the same intent. The goal is not to make everyone happy, but to make everyone effective. Happiness often follows, but it cannot be the starting point. People are most satisfied when they see progress, competence, and fairness. A strong culture creates those conditions through clarity and accountability, not through slogans. When culture becomes self-congratulatory, it eventually chokes on its own success. Growth stalls because the organization cannot question itself. Innovation slows because no one wants to take risks that challenge the norm. Talent leaves because independent thinkers feel constrained. What remains is a loyal but stagnant workforce, proud of its strong culture, yet increasingly irrelevant to the outside world. Every company reaches a moment when its original culture no longer fits its new reality. Startups face it when they scale. Established firms face it when markets shift. The difference between those that adapt and those that fail is honesty. Leaders who acknowledge that the old way no longer works can redesign their culture deliberately. Those who cling to the myth of strength usually discover that what they thought was unity was simply inertia. The solution is not to abandon culture, but to redefine it. Culture should serve strategy, not suffocate it. It should evolve as the business evolves. The strongest cultures are those that hold a small set of non-negotiable principles and allow everything else to adapt. When purpose, structure, and behavior align, culture becomes a competitive advantage rather than a liability. The myth of the strong culture survives because it feels safe. It promises certainty in a world of constant change. Yet real strength comes from clarity, adaptability, and courage. Companies that understand this treat culture as a living system, not a fixed identity. They build it deliberately, test it often, and are willing to rebuild when necessary. The rest continue to celebrate their strength until it becomes their weakness. That is the hidden truth behind the phrase. Culture does eat strategy, but when it becomes too proud, it chokes on it. Thank you for listening.